name's Charles Malki, biologist and plant expert with IVORganics, where we grow cool plants. And today we're going to be talking about tree care. Specifically to my left here is the Haas avocado. And the title of this YouTube video is, "My tree is dying, yet I did everything right." I get these emails and comments and phone calls all the time with people saying, you know, what's wrong? Why is my plant not performing? And I'm just going to quickly talk about three main things you should be doing for your tree. And with all three of them, there could be too much and too little that can also cause variables that will result in less than optimal tree growth. The first one is watering. When it comes to watering your trees, you want to make sure that you water thoroughly and water deeply. You're going to want to make sure that that water soaks the entire root ball. So if you've got a tree that's, you know, let's say 10, 15, 20 feet tall, you got to imagine those roots are going to want to be soaked at least another 5 to 10 feet. And as far as those branches extend, those roots are extending as well. So you're going to want to soak and water that entire zone and soak it. And once you do so, allow it to dry, and never bone dry, but allow it to dry between waterings. And this typically means in the spring, a watering that would be once every 10 or 14 days. So we're talking about in a month, you might water your trees only twice. And whereas in the summer, it might be a little bit more frequent, as often as maybe once a week, or if you're dealing with over 100-degree days consecutively, you might have to water your trees every 3 days. But other than that, in the summer, once a week, deep soaks. In the spring as well as the fall, as well, since the temperatures will be similar, it'll be twice a month on average. Again, the goal is to soak the plant and to make sure that the soil is dry, relatively dry, before you water again. So in regards to plant health, what's happening to this tree near me, you may notice all these leaves are just barely hanging on. And if you take a look down below, a lot of these green leaves that are down here are this year's leaves. They're supposed to stick on and stay on the tree for the remainder of this year and not fall again until next spring, when the plant goes through a next flush of new growth, providing all of these new leaves that'll be the engines for photosynthesis, which is the process of making the sugars to support the fruit and future growth and root growth. And talking about fruit, unfortunately this avocado was holding as many as 20 fruit. I saved in here in this bag. All the other ones quickly decayed with all of the biology that's here in the soil and above the soil, with including the earthworms, slugs, snails. But I wanted to save this over here. If we take a look, you can see the size of the avocados before they fell apart. And I picked this, it actually fell to the ground about 2 weeks ago. You can see it's since rotted, but you can see it's a nice sized fruit. And the tree didn't just let go of it because it wasn't ready to support fruit. This is a second-year tree, and yes, it's young and maybe it needs another year of growth and strength. But what happened in addition to all of the fruit dropping are these leaves that were once vigorous and healthy and standing upright, like the fuerte, which I'm going to show you in just a moment, all of a sudden are drooping. And this is 2 weeks ago, and unfortunately I just didn't have the time to record this. I started doing some things for mitigation, but I wanted to finish the rest of my treatment with you watching. So here's step one, watering. We talked about spring, summer, and fall watering. In the winter, I don't water my trees at all. If I'm here in Southern California, Los Angeles specifically, if there's rains at least once or twice a month, and with the cooler temperatures, that might be all the water they need. But again, if the soil is dry and you see that the tree could be in need of some water, water it. And every time you water, water deep, which means take your time. That 5 and 10 minute watering is not going to be enough. Second issue, fertilizers. I feed my trees throughout the spring, summer, and fall with organic fertilizers, which are very low risk of burning and damaging the tree compared to the chemical alternative fertilizers that exist on your shelf. And actually, most nurseries carry more chemical fertilizers than the organics. So I feed my trees typically the first week of every single month here in Los Angeles, again starting in February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, and starting October, I stop, as the plant is now going to be entering dormancy. There's no need to give it more nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and trying to encourage more root and shoot growth in the cooler months, as the plant needs to take a break. Let it enjoy those next few months in hibernation. Even though it still remains green, there's no need for additional plant growth in the winter months when there's a risk of freezing that could damage that additional growth. So it's a chance for the plant to get hardy and strengthen itself during those winter months. So fertilizer, too much fertilizer, too little fertilizer could be an issue as well. But again, the number one issue in regards to seeing this kind of stress is typically water, in which we addressed first. Fertilizer we just talked about. And the last one I want to share with you is the weather. Extreme heat. I'm cooking with all of this clothes now. It was cool this morning. It was, we're here at the first week of June, so we're dealing with June gloom. Just yesterday, all the streets were wet when we woke up in the morning. So even overnight, it wasn't even the forecast rain, but yet everything was wet. So June gloom is typically here in Los Angeles. We got those cloudy, overcast mornings, followed by still the 80s and 90s, and sometimes even approaching 100-degree afternoons. This week is expected to be in the 80s and 90s. So the stress that we're looking at is not necessarily caused by heat. This is still within the range of what is a healthy temperature for an avocado. We're not dealing with temperatures that are in the mid-90s and above, which will cause stress on the plant. And we're also not dealing with freezing cold nighttime temperatures. So again, we eliminate temperature as well. The last thing, got to check out the soil. And that's where I quickly discovered, it only took me a few minutes to discover that this tree was stressed, and within a few minutes I found out what the reason was. And the answer, ground rodents. Every single year in this garden, even though my property has got walls all around it, somehow the gophers, the moles, and the voles, some critter finds its way into my garden. And again, on average, it's 1 to 3 per year. And I'm gonna put a link towards the end of this where I talk about all the different methods of capturing and treating and curing your garden of these ground critters. The three, I'll tell you just general ways of dealing with rodents is one, and again, we're talking about the moles, the voles, the gophers, even rabbits that might be burrowing in the soil. But the first one is you're gonna be shopping for what's called repellents. The second one is the traps. And the third one is poison, and I'm always against poison. This should always be your last, if not even an option, when it comes to a method of curing your garden of any rodents in your property. But again, I'll give you the link where where I've discussed all the different products that you can find at your local garden center. Next, let's take a look at the soil, and I'll share with you what I discovered. So the first thing I noticed was there was some cracks, unusual cracks near the surface, and sometimes you'll get cracks on the surface soil with a change of temperature. And between your waterings, the soil will dry up and create the cracks between the clay or whatever other type of soil material you have as it again dries, and also when you water. Between those changes, it'll sometimes result in cracks. But the cracks I saw were completely linear. I can follow like there was a trail near the surface of the plant zone. As you take a look over here around the tree, you can see now it's pretty level, but before there was like a crack that was running straight along. It wasn't just like a random crack, and there were no other ones. So I knew there was something that was living in the soil. And what I did is I took, my gloves. I was like making sure got my hands protected in case there's something in there. And I know this here wouldn't protect myself from a bite, but what I did was I ended up soaking the zone like so with my hose. And then I would just take my fingers and start adding some pressure, and I would start pressing around the root zone like so. And even maybe just using my thumb or an index finger and just pressing around. And if there's a tunnel, so I kind of feel like a weak spot over here, your hand will actually fall right into it. Right here, I'm like collapsing right into it. And what I'm doing is I'm backfilling and filling that in. What I'll then do is I'll take my compost over here, which is a mix of, the very top of this is from my homemade compost pile, and there's also some store-bought compost in there as well. But I'll take the compost and start backfilling into those holes and filling it in. One mistake I've done many years ago was, because there's so many tunnels and there was basically most of the soil underneath this root zone was displaced, what I ended up doing was taking my shoe and simply stepping like so around the tree. And by stepping around the root zone, what ended up happening was I ended up lowering the position of the tree by several inches, because the tree and the root ball settled into those caves that were created by those ground rodents. So be careful not to step into it, and rather make sure you just use your hands and backfill those holes with a bucket of compost like I'm doing here. What you'll quickly notice, and this here was not happening 2 weeks ago, and again I told you I had to do something to help the tree until I can finally do this educational moment for you. But 2 weeks ago, this was the first thing I did, was feel for some holes. I went all the way around the perimeter of the tree, and I basically closed any of those holes using this compost. As you can see now, when I'm watering the tree, and this has only been going for about a minute now, you can see that the water is pooling around the brim that I created to help support and retain the water, so that the water doesn't run off outside the root zone. So we're soaking the root zone. What I'll do now is I can slow down the watering like so that it'll give an opportunity for the water that's pooling around it to soak into the soil and continue adding water gradually, so I can get many feet into the entire root zone of the tree. So this is an excellent practice. What I found, and what I also want to share with you in regards to these tunnels, is take a look over here, a little bit closer to yourself. You'll notice over here is one of those rodent tunnels right here that I found, that I left for this purpose. But right here is one of those tunnels, and you can see that it's no bigger than 1 or 2 of my fingers. 3 wouldn't even fit. So it's that small of a tunnel. So start from down there. So what will happen as you're doing this is typically the rodent will end up diverting the water away from the root zone. When I, again, was watering around the tree originally, the water found its way into one of the tunnels, and it probably ran under the air conditioning or other parts around this garden. So as you can see now, that's not an issue. And again, I'm just gonna feel one more time with my thumbs. Here, I actually found another weak spot right in here, where my finger's going right into it. So I'm gonna come back with some compost like so, and I'm gonna start filling that in. Again, by being gentle with this process and making sure I'm not pressing down on the entire root zone, I'm gonna make sure that the level of the tree remains where it's supposed to be, and that, again, this is like the tree trunk. It needs to be above the soil level, and the roots need to be below the soil level. If I displace the tree and push it down another foot or two, a phenomenon known as stem rot can result, because now the trunk of the tree that was once above the ground is now below the ground and now exposed to too much moisture when it's used to being above the soil level. So here we are with that. Another thing worth inspecting as well is to remove some of the soil around the tree. And I thought about doing this while it was dry, but it's probably easier now that it's wet. And what I'm doing is just taking out a little bit of the soil around the tree trunk. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm inspecting for another phenomenon known as girdling, and that's where the rodent will even gnaw against the tree trunk and try to access the saps. And this is a phenomenon that's most prevalent among gophers as well as voles. Moles are predominantly meat eaters, looking for those earthworms and the grubs in the soil, and less, of a taste for plant material. Whereas, again, the gophers, the voles, also mice and rabbits, they're looking for plant material, and they are known, and especially voles, for girdling trees. They actually, bark is part of their diet as well, so they'll gnaw on the bark and eat the bark and access the saps and the sugars and get even a nice taste with that as well. So we're going to continue removing some of the soil just to make sure that none of the tree trunk, at least from what we can inspect with very minimal damage to the root zone, can be inspected. And I've also discovered a tree a few years ago that was actually damaged by a phenomenon known as girdling by one of these ground rodents on this property. So so this is going to be something we're going to look for. I'm going to let that water subside, and then we're going to check it out together. While the water continues to get absorbed by the soil, what I also want to start doing is sharing the tree trunk with you, so you can see where we're at and what we're going to do. The tree trunk, if you take a look over here, you can still see is pretty green. And again, this tree was installed about 2.5 years ago, but you can see that it's green, and it's also got a little bit of white that's still on there, and that white is the IVORganics 3-in-1 Plant Guard, offering sunblock protection to the tree trunk so it doesn't burn. This is another common phenomenon among avocados and citrus and many other trees, especially when they're young. Their tree trunks and their lower branches get exposed to too much sunlight, and many farmers, and this is another phenomenon that goes back hundreds if not thousands of years, is a concept known as whitewashing. And whitewashing, which is done here, but it's done organically using IVORganics, is a way of keeping your plants cool at the time of installation and in those initial first few years until they ultimately develop a canopy that'll protect the lower tree trunk and branches. What I'm going to do now is remove the stake, because I'm going to come in and apply what's going to be now its second coat. So this will be its second coat in over 1 year. The protection, and many people ask me, and here's the product over here if you take a look. It's IVORganics. It's a 3-in-1 plant guard, protection against damaging sunburn insects and rodents. And the way it works is it's got these oils, castor oil, to specifically repel rodents from that attempt to taste the tree, as well as clove oils and cinnamon oil and cedarwood oil and garlic oil and peppermint oil, as well as rosemary oil. So all of these oils will naturally repel the rodents as well as the insects from harming the plant while it's getting established and gaining its strength in its place. So when it comes to protection against damaging sunburn as well as sun scald in the winter, I recommend at least 1 coat for the year. If the goal is specifically against rodents and insects, if you've got a pruned branch that needs protection, you may need to apply it up to 2, maybe even 3 times a year. So here we go. We're gonna remove the stake. So now we got the stake out like so. And we're gonna return the stake back to the tree. As you can see, it's 2.5 years old. There's still a couple more strings in here that are like one more tie that's actually supporting, but you can see it's pretty flimsy still. We're going to strengthen this tree as well. And if there was any damage to the root structure, which again, the stress, I'm telling you with more than 99% of certainty, is due to these tunnels that were under the ground that were diverting the water, so it was not getting properly hydrated. And again, if it was a vole, if it was a gopher, because again, we haven't identified specifically what it is, but chances are it's going to be a mole or a vole on this property. The gophers typically leave these mounds that we don't have any evidence of mounds here on the property, but we have had a history of gophers here as well. But what we're going to do is, in the event any of the root structure was damaged, we're going to have to offset that by pruning some of the tree structure as well. So we're going to do that right now, and check this out. So now let me compare these 2 trees, the Hass avocado to the Fuerte avocado that's behind me. Let me just get one of these leaves so you can see what it looks like here. And this here is new growth from just 4 months ago. Probably February, March is when this leaf was created. But take a look at how much larger it is. Look at the color of the leaf. And keep in mind that I've started working on repairing this Hass avocado about 2 weeks ago. So it was a lot worse, so much worse. Look what else was happening to some of these leaves, how stressed out they were. Look at this. And this is not sunburn, but this was the plant getting ready to give up. Like, it was completely stressed. Look at these light leaves. Look at this burn that happened right through the leaf. This will eventually crisp and die through. More stress over here. And it was really because this tree almost died. It was looking that bad. And I really wish I shared this with you 2 weeks ago. But you can see like what a difference this tree is. And take a look at the tips. There's no growth. Look at how easy those leaves are falling off too. I just touched one. And it just gave way, but I don't want to lose any more leaves that I have to. So, but you can see these leaves are just barely holding on compared to, look at this Fuerte over here. And for those of you that speak Spanish, Fuerte is strong, and this tree is doing really strong, very well. Take a look at this growth over here. A lot of growth. Look at the leaves, how large they are. And this is happening all the way throughout. Look at that. It's doing great. Just to be safe, if your tree's stressed, it was doing well, and all of a sudden it's giving up. You're doing everything else right. You're watering, you're fertilizing, and everything else. We got to assume the root structure down below got damaged. We're not going to dig any further than what we've done. It's still doing its best hanging on to life. But to offset the damage that may have resulted underground, what you're going to have to do is remove some of the growth above the ground. And we're going to do so now by bringing in the structure a little bit closer to the central leader, which is the central trunk. And we're going to remove some of these lateral branches, or at least remove them partially. So what we're going to do, and you can notice that I removed the central leader at this point over here where my finger is. So right at this point, it created these other side branches, and we did the same thing with the Fuerte. If you back up a couple of feet, I just want to point out over here, you can see that we've done the same thing over here. We removed the central leader at this point. We got these 1, 2, 3 branches that have since come out of the tree structure. So you can see, look at the vigor of these trees, and we're going to end up pruning this back as well in an upcoming video, so stay tuned, and within the next week or two I'll do just a specific instructional video on making sure you have a balanced, vigorous tree, all within the range of, you know, my goal is to pick it as much as I can from ground, as well as using just a small step ladder. This tree on its own will grow anywhere from 20 to 30 plus feet. My goal is to keep it in a range of about 15. I'm going to teach you how to do that and to make sure that these lower branches are not shaded out and damaged by these larger, hugely vigorous upper branches that will eventually shade out and damage these lower branches if they're not pruned back. And I'm going to teach you how to do that in the next week or two. So stay tuned for that. And now let's come back over here. So with this branch, if you take a look, it's about 4, 5, 6 feet long. What we're going to do is we're going to basically prune this branch back to where we find another nice set of branches that will continue creating this growth again in hopefully the very near future. So I found some branch structure over here, these little branches, that'll hopefully create these other larger branches, again, hopefully in the upcoming months. We're now at the beginning of June. This is supposed to be the peak of the growing season, and we're not getting any growth again because of the stress that the plant had to endure. So we just shortened this branch, and we're going to look for other branches we can do the same. And here we go. And here's another example. If you want to come in a little closer, this is a good point. If you take a look in here, you'll notice that there's a larger branch and a smaller branch. And what we're going to do is remove the larger branch out. That'll remove all of those leaves that are causing the plant to dry out and allow the roots to then support these smaller branches and smaller leaves. So we took out a larger branch to make way for a smaller branch that'll hopefully get the plant back in balance so it can continue to grow for us in the very near future. And all of this will be composted around the tree towards the end of the video. You'll see that in just a minute. When pruning, I'm going to make another tip real quick, which you can see here. So here we've got these branches. Here's the lateral branch with all of these other branches that are coming out of it. Again, we're going to cut it back down to about 50% of the way. And what I'm doing is I'm just coming to the closest branch. Ideally, I'd leave both. I'm still going to leave both. So hopefully you can see these two branches over here. I'm going to move some of these leaves so you get some more light. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go with our pruners and we're going to cut at an angle like so. Let me get this leaf out of the way so you can see better. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut about 1/4 of an inch above this branch and cut like so. But I'm going to make a mistake here and cut it like this just to show you the difference. If I prune it like so, this tip is going to ultimately die more likely than not. It's not likely to create another bud that'll result in another branch. Instead, this will result in dead wood. So all of the sugars and waters and life-giving support is going to come through this branch, go to these two branches, and then end up leaving this dead wood that'll be a perfect entryway for pathogens, including beetles and termites. So what we're going to do now is cut it to about 1/4 of an inch above the next nearest branch, and this will create a much better flow of the waters and sugars through the plant structure, and eventually this will heal over as this branch over here expands and grows over this particular wound. And that's the reason we pruned it the way we did. And let's continue forward. And there we go. Take another look now. If you want to step back, check this out. So we've just thinned out this plant tremendously. In addition to now increasing hopefully the root balance to the amount of plant that's growing, we should hopefully see some growth in the very near future. Hopefully in the upcoming few weeks we're going to start seeing these leaves turn more green. We should see these buds start swelling. We should start seeing growth as we just saw just a minute ago on the Fuerte. What we're going to do next also, because we've now thinned the canopy, and here we are now in June, we're not going to be dealing with the hottest months of the year. What we're going to do now is basically cool the entire plant with the IVORganics 3-in-1 plant guard. We're going to brush on the product on all of the stems, and then we're going to spray the leaves to keep them several degrees cooler through those hottest months. I know there's people, for example, growing these trees in hot climates, such as in Riverside as well as in Las Vegas, which would be, you know, a more popular place most of you know. And for those of you that go to Las Vegas in the summer, you know that the daytime temperatures are 110, if not hotter. These trees cannot tolerate over 100 degree temperatures without those leaves burning. This is an excellent practice on helping you grow plants that don't naturally grow in those climates and get them through those hottest months where they'll continue to thrive year after year. So let's get started with brushing on the IVORganics. So the first thing here I'm going to start doing is I'm going to coat the tree trunk as low as I can go with the hope of protecting it from future girdling. We're a little bit below the soil level, and I'm eventually going to backfill the soil once this product dries in the next 15 to 30 minutes. And I'm going to work my way all the way up the tree trunk as high as I can go. So you can continue applying the IVORganics plant guard all the way up to the highest stems by just brushing it on like so. I want to share one more thing on the directions over here. If you take a look, it says you can use it as a brush on direction, which is what we're doing now. You can also use it as a foliar spray direction, which we're going to talk about in a second, as well as tree paste direction. So depending on how much water you add, the same can could be used in that way. I also want to point out the fact that it's now registered material for use in organic agriculture. So this is another important consideration. So if it gets too complicated to apply between the branches, you can just use it as a foliar spray. Let me just finish this real quick. I'm making a lot of progress pretty quickly. And let me get the back side. Oh, while I'm doing this, another important consideration I want to share with you is that one side of the tree is always getting more sunlight than the other side of the tree. I know that may not sound logical. You would think that the sun is coming up on one side of the tree and then going overhead and then setting on the other side where the tree is uniformly getting light, but that's not the case. In fact, the sun is rising on my left, which is the east, setting on the west. This is facing south, that way is facing north, and the sun is leaning and warming up this side of the tree significantly more than the back side of the tree. But just looking at the tree in general, it might look like all of the leaves are getting burnt. I apologize for the noise behind me. There's construction going on about 2 doors down, but I just want to get through this. I'm hoping you can hear my voice over what's happening behind me. But what's happening over here is you can take a look. If you check out these leaves, you'll notice that they all have sunlight on them, but the ones in the back, which is the north-facing leaves, actually have some shade on the leaves. Like check this out over here. But it's more evident on a more full tree, such as this one over here, being the Fuerte avocado tree. Again, the light is all over this side of the tree. This is the south-facing side of the tree, but the inner side and that whole back side of the tree is all in the shade. That's the north-facing side of the tree. So this is extremely relevant when it comes to protecting the tree trunk from sunburn damage, and that's the reason that we're coating the plant with the IVORganics 3-in-1 plant guard. So we're going to try to get all of those upper branches. If you take a look at the very top, hopefully you can zoom in here a little bit closer. You might even see some of that discoloration with the surface that's most exposed to the sun up here compared to the lower branches, which is a little bit darker green. So we're just going to, again, protect that like so. And the brush is going to give it a much thicker and greater protection than what would otherwise be offered with just the foliar spray. But the foliar spray is going to help too, as you're going to see in just a moment. So another consideration before installing your tree to prevent this stress from ever happening is installing something like this. And it just looks like a sheet of chicken wire, but in fact it's open, available to open, as you can, it's indicated here by the green paint that's on one side and not on the other. The green strip that's near the surface is supposed to stay above ground and protect the tree that would then be installed in this chicken wire cage. So you would basically take your tree, like for example, let's say if I were planting this apple tree, for example, once I took it out of the pot, I would plant it within this cage, and again would plant it down to the level of where these green lines are, and now these roots would be rodent proof. Any gophers, moles, voles, or whatever would not affect it. But take a look at this chicken wire. It's about the size of a quarter, and we saw that, you know, here I can stick a finger in. So I would say a small mole may be able to still fit in here. So this will help protect against gophers, you know, that are medium and large, but the smaller rodents may still find their way into there, and once they're in, they might even make this home. The best place and the best environment for these ground rodents is right at the base of these trees and in that root zone where there's going to be a lot of moisture, there's going to be a lot of insects, there's going to be a lot of vegetation and roots that are growing, and there's just a lot more life than at random zones within your garden. So the trees naturally are going to attract the rodents, and you got to do something to protect it if you're in a zone where this is a major problem. What we're going to do now that we've coated the lower trunk and we've allowed it to dry over the last 10-15 minutes, is we're just going to backfill the soil back into its position. So we're just going to fill that back in like it was before. You may notice as well that I've got a lot of wood chips around the tree as well. All around this zone are all wood chips. Take a look. And it's a couple of inches thick of wood chips that are all around the root zone, but it's not near the tree trunk. But they're not considerate of the risk of and again, that phenomenon called stem rot. If you start putting too many wood chips against the stem like so, and you put wood chips all over the base like that, what will eventually happen is as the wood is rotting, it'll cause the stem to rot and cause damage against the tree. So all of this stays at least a couple of inches to, in this case, I'm keeping it about a foot away from the tree trunk. And we're just gonna allow that to go like so. Additionally, I'm not a fan of putting cages around my tree for another reason. Check out the thickness of the tree trunk. This tree is only 2 years old. You can imagine another year it's going to be strangled. And again, this is just a tree trunk. The roots are similar in width to this tree trunk and only growing thicker. So if the roots get, you know, start growing through this mesh, eventually those roots are going to get girdled too. They're going to get strangled and constricted, and it too can harm and affect the health and the quality of your tree. So if you're going to be planting large, vigorous trees like this, this may not be the best way to go. Just a consideration. The next thing we're going to do is take our IVORganic. It's again a 3-in-1 plant guard, ready to use spray. We're just going to shake it like so. I still have a half a bottle from other applications here in the garden. And we're just going to spray the leaves now to basically cool the entire plant off. This is an excellent practice when transplanting anything, including your vegetables, to relieve any sun stress, as well as transplanting any of your plants into pots, transplanting any trees into the ground. This is an excellent way to help it, again, get some relief from the sun stress through spring, summer, and even your early fall plantings. So all of the branches I could not coat, the foliar spray is going to get. All of these tiny branches, all of these little stems that lead to the leaves, everything's getting coated with the application of the IVORganics. And now if you zoom in a little closer, you can notice on the leaves that they've now got this pale white organic shield to help repel excess sunlight so that the plant can get a break as we now go into June, July, and August, the hottest months here in Los Angeles. So all of the cuttings that we took from this Hass avocado are going right back into the soil. Never throw this stuff away. All of the fertilizers you put in your soil, all of the elements you've used to enrich the soil to get those into these living plant tissues, do not waste them. Recycle them right back into the soil by putting them around your wood chips and basically helping to, one, retain moisture in the soil, and two, these elements are going to end up back in your soil, invigorating the soil biology, the earthworms, the soil nematodes, the beneficial fungi. All of these things are going to consume this living matter and return it back into the soil. That'll eventually turn back into more branches, more leaves, and again, we're hoping for some quality Hass avocados. One of the last steps now is we just put the stake back in position. We secured it into the ground about a couple of feet. And the reason for staking it, even though it looks like it's got a pretty strong structure that should support the tree, is to make sure it withstands those 30, 40, 50, and 60 mile per hour winds that do pass a few times through the year. It's still in a position where it could easily be broken by those types of wind forces. So we're going to secure it for at least another year, possibly 3 years. So somewhere in that range, this tree will become thick enough and these branches will be short enough and strong enough to support the hopefully hundreds of avocado fruit that with a structure, and again with managed pruning, that we're going to create a structure that's going to be strong enough and balanced enough to support maximum yields of fruit. So in this example, I'm going to be using twine to secure the tree. I know there's better examples, such as you can use an old shirt and shred those into strips. That'll be a lot more gentle on the bark when securing it. But the point I want to make is when securing the tree, make sure you tie your knot against the stake and not against the tree, because just simply tying the knot against the tree will constrict the flow of the juices, the waters and the sugars in the tree. So we're tying the knot against the stake like so. I'm going to do a couple more square knots to secure the knot in place. And then we will wrap it around the tree like so. And you'll notice that I've left a distance between the stake as well as the tree trunk. So this gap will allow the tree to continue to expand with this tie that we've done in place. And now we're just going to tie that in place. That'll allow the tree also to move a couple of inches with the wind. It'll help it gain strength until eventually we can remove the stake and it can stand on its own. So we're just going to soak this one last time because this will be the last watering it gets for at least the next 7 to 10, 15 days. If you've enjoyed this educational video by IVORganics, be sure to like it, and most importantly, by subscribing below, you'll be connected to this as well as many other educational videos produced by IVORganics. Thanks again for watching, and happy gardening.